All right, so welcome to the show today. Today we have Ralf Morawietz on the show, and he's been Group CIO and Transformational Leader for some really interesting bigger corporations in the past. And I want to talk really to you about your story. I want to talk about transformation leadership today. So I'm super excited to have you on the show, Ralf. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome. Thanks.
So let's dive right into your story. Tell us a little bit more about who is Rolf and also about the journey that you had so far. Maybe there's been one or two defining moments that you feel really shaped you as a human being, really shaped you as a leader along the way.
Mhm. Well, I'm a normal guy, I would say. Born and raised in Germany. Uh, did my school and went to the army, which was necessary at that point in time and mandatory. And after that, I tried to really start at the university and found out at that point in time I was not really ready to engage with the academic life, and decided to have an apprenticeship in Germany, which is very, very common. And that brought me immediately into the interface between the business and IT. And that was back in 1988, when IT really was new in many companies. It was changing dramatically from large systems into PCs and more client environments. And I was at the interface really of this technology change that happened at that point in time, but really on the tech side. And that shaped my whole understanding of technology ages back. So even today, I'm very familiar with all the development trends, the technical architectures that are evolving, and that is rooted in the deep understanding on how the technology work at the core. And I would say this really defined me on my technical skill-based side. The other defining moment for me was when I started to work in large companies. And the first one was really DHL, Deutsche Post, which was a monster of a company from a size perspective. More than 500,000 people working there. I was working in the head office in Bonn, and for some time also in Brussels. And that teach me a lot about change, how to manage change, how to effectively motivate people and bring them along. And that was really where I learned the art of dealing with people, developing people, and becoming a leader that people are following, not because of fear, but because of belief. And I think that made a huge change and shaped my whole understanding of how projects and companies become successful.
I love that. I love that you elaborated both on the one side, the technical side, and on the other side, also the people side or the leadership side in that sense. So let's talk a little bit more about motivations. Not motivating others, but motivating yourself for a moment. We talked a little bit about that in another conversation we had, but I'm really curious about what is it that motivates you, that drives you, that triggers you, that gets you up in the morning to go do the work that you're doing.
What motivates me are challenges. Uh, I could not stand a position or a job where dullness and routine is the overarching thing. I need the conflict, the positive conflict of fighting for the best solution and pushing organizations, people, and companies forward. And not only based on the targets for profit and revenues, but also how to evolve an organization from a cultural point of view and from a human side. So what really is thrilling for me to see people who are, let's say, stuck in their career for various reasons, and then helping them to take another step, and then watch them how they progress, take over larger, more responsible roles, and become leaders themselves. And that is what really drives me most.
I'm curious to dive a little bit deeper into that. Why do you think that is, or why are you motivated by helping people grow themselves, and with themselves help them grow the organization? Why? What is it that gets you excited about that?
What gets me excited is, in the end, the people side. It is maybe something that is more philosophical really business driven, but it gives me a great sense of satisfaction to see that people are sort of locked in their position. They are constrained by boundaries which they have set up mostly themselves. And then they find all of a sudden opportunities to break out of this cage that locks them in and go into areas which they were not thinking of. And this happened to a degree to myself. As I had no university degree, I was always feeling a little bit weaker compared to the colleagues who had university degrees and so on and so on. And I learned when I did my executive MBA at the Durham University and the European Business School, that it helped me not so much from the knowledge I got, but really mentally from the self-awareness of being all of a sudden on equal levels, which is crazy, yeah, but it's psychology. And that is really something that motivates me and gives me this great sense of satisfaction when I see people doing things that they were not capable before.
Really interesting when you said sort of like the self-imposed cage, I guess is an interesting way of framing it, you know, because you know, of course we can always blame others and say, well, they didn't let me, you know, this is not possible here. But at the end of the day, just by saying that and speaking that, you know, we put that constraint on something. It's not really, I mean, sure, there's, you know, somebody else, okay, possibly, yeah, but at the end of the day, it's always coming from our own intention, because at the end of the day, a lot of things are possible, if not almost everything. So I really love that. I want to talk a little bit about your journey now and the lessons learned along the way, you know, through the different roles you had throughout your career. If you had to point out one or two very important lessons where you feel like this was really fundamental for me to go through and to learn, what would you point out?
The one thing is dating back, I don't know, 20 years, maybe even more. It was at a classroom seminar for training how to speak and to present to others, so to say. And there, the teacher, after a week of training, asked me why I'm always so silent in these meetings. And I said, well, what should I say? You know, everybody saying great things, so why should I? And he pointed out to me that if I don't make myself heard, I cannot influence the discussion. I cannot really lead. So you have to speak up. You have to be engaged in order to take over leadership positions. And that was something for me where I, looking backwards, found out it is damn true. I never did that. And because of that, maybe I got also stuck in the career ages ago. And that was a defining moment, you could say, and something which I learned from the bottom of my heart, that if you don't speak up, if you don't engage in meetings, don't go there. It's pointless. That is the one thing. The other big change for me was really when I understood how important it is to listen. The higher you get in organizations, the more you start to believe that you always have to talk and that everybody has to listen to you. But it is fundamentally important also concerning the next questions that you're going to ask. If you want to take your people along, that you listen to their concerns and also to their suggestions, because the people around us are not stupid. They have ideas, they have great ideas. And if you're not open for these ideas, you lose out so much potential that is just crazy. I think that is, if you look at the two defining moments, the one is really self-reflection. How did I present myself at meetings? And the other thing is about engaging organizations, be approachable, be open, and listen.
It's really interesting, those two sides, to hear those two sides, because what I'm hearing in the speaking up is less about telling, you know, people or advising or necessarily, telling, you know, somebody what to do or how to do it, but it's more about speaking up when first of all, when you feel that there's a need for speaking up and you just want to express yourself, one thing. And the other thing what you mentioned is engagements, being engaged, being part of the conversation. And it doesn't always mean, you know, you step in and then you have a speech, but it can mean, you know, just just being there and having your body language also be there and be present and be engaged. I really love that. And the other side of the coin as well, which is listening. And we're going to talk about that in a second. But this is really interesting because, obviously only through listening you can really understand people's motivations, why they do what they do, what drives them. And because of that, then, influence them and engage them in the right way. So let's talk a little bit more about the topic of leadership. I call it transformational leadership. Basically, when you need to take the lead or when you're leading in times of change, in times of, massive change, transformation. So I know there's no operations manual for transformation leadership, but is there a playbook for you? Is there a framework that you use to tackle change?
There is, and it is a very, very simple one. Because I think complexity doesn't work in change and transformation. It needs to adhere to the KISS principle, keep it stupid and simple. And mine is around accountability, responsibility, and openness. What my people, and when I started my last job, I was very explicit in the first meeting with my new leadership team that I will definitely not do their jobs. So they are employed for a job, and the accountability lies with them to make sure that they fulfill this job. So what I told them straight away, that I will provide guidelines, I provide direction. I'm there for questions and answers and every support they need, but they have to make sure to own the accountability and feel responsible for really making sure that the job that they have to do is done or is getting done. And also what I lived up through, I hope, when you speak to my people, to be open and transparent and predictable. Because in the end, if you as a leader are not predictable for your people, it becomes very, very difficult for them to deal with you. And if people are afraid of you, then the best solutions will not come forward. They will try to bring up the solutions which they believe will suit you. And that leads to mediocre results from my point of view. So rather have a open, constructive, and sometimes challenging discussion, but get the best result, than have a calm horde of people who obey orders but are not creative and are not moving beyond what they have to do. And I think this is, if you want to call it, my playbook: responsibility, accountability, and then clear, transparent way forward.
I want to talk a little bit more about those aspects. It's really interesting. I mean, it's simple in the sense there's principles in a way. So it's simplistic from that point of view, but it's definitely not simplistic in a way of application and actually, doing the things or having people take responsibility or feeling accountable, in a certain way. So I wanted to pick accountability for a second as a first piece. Talk to me about accountability. So, I guess it's easy when you come into an environment and everybody's already ingrained in accountability in a sense, right? It's not. But what if you encounter an organization, a situation where people don't feel accountable? They have very loose understandings of what they're actually accountable for and what they're actually supposed to be doing in a sense of, outcomes and milestones and things. How do you approach that?
Well, the good thing in many companies is that you have a certain framework given by HR, that has target setting, stuff like that, processes implemented that you can lean on, so to say. And then it is about, especially in the first 3 months, creating an environment where people, especially the people that are your direct reports, understand the change that is coming. And they understand that the change is not something where they get an operations manual, but that is a change of behavior and a change of thinking. And for some people, it is really difficult. They struggle and they fail. And then the important part is, at least for me, you can of course fire them and say, okay, you're not up to the standards that I expect. Bye. but the organization is watching you very, very carefully, how you behave, especially in these first 3 months. And if you treat those people, because normally they are not ill-willed or bad people, they're just in the wrong position what is needed going forward. If you find solutions that keeps them, for example, in the organization at a better position, maybe 1-2 levels below, it gives you already a boost in accountability and credibility, let's put it like that. And then it's a process of a lot of communication. And it's stressful, I tell you, because it's not easy. It sounds very simplistic, but it has a lot to do with communication and details. Because the people are challenging you, especially in the first couple of months. Do you really mean what you're talking about? Is it serious, or is it just a facade that is put up to give us a feel-good atmosphere, and then the backslash is coming at a certain point in time? And this process of communication, building trust, because this is the foundation of it, is very, very stressful, and it takes the first 3 to 6 months. Also, what you have to do normally in existing teams, if you take them over, there are tensions, there are histories, backpacks, long histories of mistrust in some cases, and ironing out those, bringing them to the surface, making sure that the people in public talk about how they cannot work with somebody in the team is very, very important for me to really make sure everybody is on the same level, and then you can draw a line and say, let's move on. And for some, this step is too large, and they leave because they cannot work in such an environment, which is then unfortunate. But what I found out in the last engagements that I had is that people are very, very, how do you say, happy with this kind of change. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense, yes. And I wanna dive into something a bit more that you touched already, because I want to understand how you tackle that, which is openness, right? And openness is not necessarily a given within most company cultures and within most people at the end of the day, right? And also within most organizations as a behavior. It's not necessarily something that you are encouraged to behave like most of the time, although maybe organizations say they want to have more open people, but then, there's contradicting, statements as well. So talk to me about openness. How do you get people to open up, to share, to be transparent and actually truthful? How do you get that done?
It's a good question. And I have to confess, I don't understand it completely myself. When I was part of the Deutsche Post group, they did an assessment center with me. And one of the things that the psychologist told me that I do inspire trust. I have no clue how I do it, but it seems something that is naturally in me, that people want to trust me. And that, of course, makes a lot of things easier. And funnily enough, it works across cultures. Yeah, so I have the same situations in Asia or in the US or in Latin America. It is more or less working across the globe so far, at least. And of course, trust is if it is given freely, it is lost very simple and very fast. And once it is lost, regaining it is nearly impossible. And it's also clear that, especially in positions like CIO positions, you cannot be 100% open because there are things that cannot be communicated for whatever reasons. But those things that you can communicate, you have to be open about. And to give you an example, the cost factor in Switzerland is, especially when you work with externals, high. And we, in the last engagement, were looking at chances to lower our cost base, increasing personal headcount, but not firing any people. So we started a center of excellence in Portugal, and we communicated that from the beginning to everybody in the IT department. And of course, there was a lot of concerns. They say, we should not do that, and the people will get fearful. They will start looking for alternatives. We lost, I would say, nearly nobody. The concern was high, and there was a lot of rumors. And the new CIO, he's saying, but then, and when they saw it is not happening, it gave a boost of morale, of course, and of trust. So, and in many cases, it is the small things that inspire, in the end, trust.
It's really interesting. I mean, what I've seen now in what you shared, or my conclusion is sort of like the way you inspire openness is, maybe this is overly simplistic, but the way you inspire openness is by being open. Yes. The way you inspire predictability is by being predictable. That's another interesting one that you mentioned, because most of the time when people use the word predictability, they mean you want to have predicting revenues, predictable this, but they're not looking at themselves and saying, being predictable myself, in a sense. That's really interesting. So like my conclusion of that, even though we don't know the exact how behind it, it's sort of like always starts with the self. It always starts with, if you want to have a trusted, if you want people to trust you, a good way of starting is by trusting people, or trusting people more, basically, and demonstrating that you trust them. That's a really interesting insight that I just got from this. So there's one more question I want to ask you, which is a little bit more in the sky and out there and long term. So let's say you're 80 years old now, and you're looking back from your rocking chair, and you're looking back at your life, and you see how the world has changed. And looking back at that moment, what is a change that you would want to see in the world?
Oh, I want to see a world where a future is given and not uncertain. For my kids, for my friends, for the families of my kids, and so on. I don't want to be at the age of 80 and have a world that is completely in ruin, in shambles, and where we know that we are the last generation who lived in splendor, and now misery reigns and rules, and it's only a question of time that extinction of humankind is happening. Yeah. That is what I would want to see. The question is always, what can I as an individual do for stuff like that? And that most likely is the most challenging questions of all, because it impacts us all. And we have to find ways how to be profitable while being good to the environment.
I love that. I love that on the one side, because I think it's about hope. It's about a bright future. I think that's the way you said it. That's one thing. But then also in terms of how we get there, or then on the other side of the coin, not get to the other side. You said you got to be profitable and good to the environment, and probably to many other things. And I really I like that combination, because it means sustainability, I guess, in the most fundamental way, because sustainability is not just about profitability, and it's not just about the environment, and it's not just about any other aspect of whatever. I think sustainability is a lot more holistic at the end of the day. So thank you so much, Ralf. I really appreciate this conversation, you being here and sharing. And we're going to link below this video to a LinkedIn profile, so people can also connect and reach out. And once again, thanks for being here, Ralf. Appreciate it.
It was a pleasure. Thank you, Daniel.